Well, back 12 hours later, car's stuck in the snow. Walked home just for this. I could have just slept in the snow. But I care too much about this. Okay. So, Men in Headed 2 is still stuck in a memory of his childhood where he's with his mom and dad. Now, they have a group of people rowing the boat for them or who work on the raft with them. And they all seem to be quite interesting folks with names like Bone Smasher, Whip Licker, I don't know what that one is, Butthole Face. Okay, so it's Bone Smasher, White Teeth, Eater of Blood, and He of the Nose, a tremendous nose. Maybe that means like the nose of the boat. They're hanging out. And then it made a funny aside that says, where was the boatman without his lice? Like, they go together like ham and eggs and peanut butter. That bothered my mother considerably. She had a detestation of body insects so intense that she could lose her composure at mention of them. Well, this was hardly an unusual attitude for a young matron of Memphi, since many in their fear of infestations would crop their heads and wear wigs for every public appearance. Wigs? From what, though? Interesting. My mother was proud of her hair. It was vigorous and dark and had a wave that curled with the sinuosity of a snake. So she preferred to keep it long and live in fear of head lice. Fair enough. Can you just drown them? Probably not. Indeed, there had been an episode just the night before. But now as I recollected, it was also clear why we did not row upstream towards the Pharaoh's palace, but rather drifted down. My mother, my father, and I had spent last night with Men in Headed who lived up the river south of Memphi in a great house 100 paces in width, an equal number in depth, and 3 stories high. It was said he had 50 rooms, and I knew he had a roof garden with awnings made of the material of tents, for there was a view from that roof at evening when the sun filled the river with a million red and dancing fish, and the desert to the east turned to indigo, even as the sandstone hills of the west became pink and carmine and orange and glowing gold, like the blood fire of an oven as the sun went into the hills. My great-grandfather spoke to me at that moment, a rare occasion. I was used to relatives and servants recognizing that I was not an ordinary child. Indeed, I could even feel against the sweet purity of the admiration I used to evoke in men and women to whom I spoke. For they were usually delighted in how adult I was for 6. Men in Headed, however, had never indicated I was of any interest to him, yet now he put a hand on my waist and drew me forward. I thought they didn't exist together. But now he has a memory of them spending time together for long periods of time, and feelings that Men in Headed one had about him. Now he put a hand on my waist and drew me forward. Have you looked at the colors on the palette of the scribe? I nodded. They are black and red. When I saw the light in his eye, I added, they are like the sky at evening and the sky at dark, at night. Yes, he said. That is one reason they are black and red. Can you give me another? Our deserts are red, but the best earth is black once the flood has passed. Excellent. Can you offer another reason? I can think of none. He took out a small jeweled knife and put the point to my finger. A drop of blood came forth. I would have cried out, but something in his expression kept me still. That is the first color to remember, he told me, just as black as the last. He said no more. Wasn't it red? Just as black is the last. He said no more. Like, if you're bleeding, you start out red and end up black because you decompose. He said no more, merely patted me and left. But later, I heard him chatting with Hathfertiti, and he mentioned my name. I could tell by my mother's low, sensual laugh that his words were kind. She always took physical pleasure in a good reference to me, as though her own body were being admired. And if I happened to be in her sight, a musk of affection would come from her. Under that loving look, my body felt bathed in flowers. I had learned to gather such love as if it were a perfume equal to the breath of recollection. Nothing was more beautiful to me as a child than this power of memory. Fortified by the pleasure my mother took in me, each sight recollected came back with luster. I could look at the red hills across the river on the sunset and have dreams of the wonders of the desert as I fell asleep, and the silver water of an oasis. Tonight, since there was almost no wind, the torches at the corners of the roof were lit, and a servant stood by each torch with a pot of water. That was my great-grandfather taking his enjoyment of the fire in face of the ever-present danger of the servant falling asleep and a wind springing up. Every few years, a great wooden house would burn that way. On the consequence, the torches were a luxury. One needed good servants to guard such fires. What a fun job. Of course, the torches did give a light that was more exciting than our candles. By one of the torches, a woman was dancing. She moved with slow undulations of her body, as lascivious as the curve of Hathfertiti's hair, and the sistrum with its singing wires was played by a dwarf wearing nothing but a gold purse and a few bracelets on his stunted biceps. He played with a tiny man's frenzy, and her hips quivered to the sound he made. I'll be back in a second. In fact, Menenhetit's little orchestra brought a stir to the guests when they appeared. The harper, the cymbal player, the piper, and the drummer were all dwarfs, no taller than myself, and all exceptionally skillful, except for the one who played the harp, since his arms were too short, and therefore left his longer runs full of peril. What was that sense? Oh, he just wasn't good at playing it because his arms were short. They also spoke in strange languages, being descended from prisoners captured in old wars with the kings of Arvid, Carchemish, and Egerath. And their voices together, with little faces, roused a stir of applause for everything they played. It was all received with exaggerations of attention from Menenhetit's guests, who were priests and judges, rich merchants, and neighboring nobles from the best temples and good society of the land just south of Memphi. Prosperous people, certainly, but not so prosperous that they did not feel honored to be asked to my great-grandfather's house, and honored again by being invited up to his roof garden. Although I heard a few murmur in disappointment this night that the most illustrious guests were not so celebrated as expected, and no one, but for my father, was a high official from the palace. All the same, Menenhetit's reputation was renowned from the Delta to the First Cataract. Even my nurse used to giggle lasciviously at the mention of his name. And the gossip I heard among the guests, for I was considered too young to comprehend the jokes, concerned which women had already had an affair with Menenhetit, as opposed to those he was considering. It must have been a disappointing evening for the wives, and a relief to more than one husband, that he spent most of his time sitting next to my mother. I stayed away. Sometimes when they were near one another, I could feel a force so powerful I would not dare to walk between them, as if to interrupt their mood could strike you to the ground. This evening, Menenhetit did not leave her side. They sat unmoving through the music. My father could hardly decide where to go. Sitting near them, he was not given much for his attempts at conversation, and when, on the confidence of his own fine features, he proceeded to charm one wife or another, the attempt soon ran out. food. The attempt soon ran out, for nothing came back to him from Hathfertiti. She sat side by side with Menenhedit in a silence that spoke of their attention for one another. Hathfertiti held a tuft of black hair in her fingers, and with it she stroked the black curls over her head. The tuft, taken from the tail of the sacred bull, prevented the onset of gray hair. Interesting. And my mother continued this ritual with self-absorption, as if these intent caresses to herself would increase her inestimable value. All right, I'll look that up. Whatever. I'm leaving it on now. I've been trying to be careful with this one. I'm reading this book to try to make it like, chill, where I'm just reading the book. I want to like make it seem like I'm like an actual narrator, which is not how I read most books on Prelude to Ulysses. It's mostly just me jabbering and fucking complaining and shit. Inesti. So, I don't know. I feel like I should talk more bullshit in this one. INES, INA, INC, INC, IND, INF, INER, INS, INESTIM. I lost it. IMABLE. Inestimable. What do you think it means? Wrong. What it actually means is I lost it again. Inestimable, an adjective. Incapable of being estimated or assessed. Incalculable. Woo! That's a great fucking word. It was inestimable to me. Oh, my cars suck. Fuck. It's over there. It's not even at my house. I walked here. Shh. Inestimable. To do inestimable harm. Number 2. Too precious to be estimated or appreciated. Invaluable, priceless. An inestimable champion of freedom. Inestimable. I fucking love that word. Beautiful. What a good one. Thanks for coming on that journey with me. If you like that, most of my other shit is just like that. Me confused, inestimable. Now where the fuck am I? Ugh. As if these intent caresses to herself would increase her inestimable value. How would you increase that? After the music was done, a few guests began to leave. Here anyone could have recognized how immense the reputation of my great-grandfather, since he did not even speak to them as they approached his chair, knelt, and touched their foreheads on the floor. Only a pharaoh, a vizier, a high priest, or one of the most honored generals of the nation would act in such a fashion. Indeed, Menenhedit presented his indifference to the departure of his guests with such a natural concentration upon his own thoughts, so equal in gravity to Hathfertiti's immersion in the stroking of the bull's hair upon her head, that the guests moved away without a sign, and yet were not displeased, but rather looked honored that they had been allowed to stand before him, as if now they could hear the echo of his great feats in the boredom he showed in the presence of those he had invited. Kind of a beautiful sentence. Standing in silence before his silence, so they could feel steeped in tales of his wickedness and knowledge of magic. And indeed, these feelings came over them with such power that it left me feeling most alive, until I could as well have existed in 2 abodes of time. I was not only standing in a corner of the roof garden near the slaves who garden the torches, but was returned as well to the black alcove in the pyramid with the light of the star on the water, able to know from this memory of my childhood that my guide for the land of the dead had been a man of great esteem when he was among the living. In learning this, I was carried along that stream of sensation, which came to my hand from his bent fingers. And I leaned forward, and to my great surprise, gave him a kiss there in the darkness on his withered lips. Man, this is... So I'm not quite sure what's just occurred. It seems like his memory has now encompassed the existence of... or has maybe intertwined with the memory of some time with Mendenhead at one. Unless I'm missing something, which is very likely, because I'm not the sleekest stick in the gaggle, if you know what I mean. I'm not the most shriveled worm in the pasta, you know. I'm not the doctorate of philosophy in the barn of owls. Yeah, that's But it seems like in the land of the dead, or in Kurt Netter, you are kind of living in the dreams and memories of all things before you. And perhaps after, because Hathfertiti's here too. Perhaps remembering, perhaps in as real a form as any. It's quite beautiful, if I'm reading this correctly. Because he did not... Sorry, baby, am I yelling too loud? If I say the F word, Lotus gets mad. Wow, it's just interesting if that's what's occurring. It's well done. They opened like the dirty skin of an apricot, just pulled from a dusty tree, and I felt the ripe, warm flesh of a mouth so rich with sinuous promise that the kiss even lingered on the air after I drew back. And by that movement must have turned in my mind to Mendenhead and my mother sitting together on the roof garden in carnal silence. Does that mean sexual? God, I really hope. I'm done with incest. Just not interested in it. See, this is why I usually do this book in the morning, because I'll just be flat out. Now it's nighttime. I've had a whole fucked up day, and I want to jabber. No one's here to listen except for myself. Pointed at myself. Fuck it, who cares? I don't know, maybe somebody does. What if someone listened to the, however long I've been doing this, and then got to this one, and they're like, what the fuck is wrong with this asshole? This is how it normally is, motherfucker. I was trying to do good before. We'll go back to good. But, we're on page 101. This is much more normal for me. I really hope. Okay. I do not know how long it was. I've been reading the Bible too, and it's fucking full of incest, man. It's like, ugh. I do not know how long it was before. I'm not reading the... Okay, before they were alone. But now the guests were gone, and my father had departed as well. Where to? Seemed hardly to my mother's concern. And even I was gone so far as anyone might know. For I had wandered to the other side of the roof, and in fascination was looking down on the last of the guests strolling through the avenue of flowers in the long garden below. The moon had risen, and by its light, the water in the wading pool was so brilliant that I could nearly see the captive fish. The servants of Mendenhead had searched the marshes and swamps with their nets that afternoon to find the most brilliant examples of the sun and moon in gold and silver fingerlings. Be awesome. Fingerlings are fish, I'm assuming. My great-grandfather's pardons were much talked about in Memphis, but for the estates of the pharaoh, there may not have been another superior to it. The pool was renowned for the work of the craftsmen who had laid out decorations in tile that looked like flowers, but were composed of rare stones. Garnet and amethyst, carnelian, turquoise, lapis lazuli, and onyx were some. I knew their value when the servants who guarded the pool looked back at me with the eyes of falcons. They were responsible that none of the gems came loose from their setting or were stolen. Such a loss would have been worth one of their hands. I'd probably quit that job. In fact, there were white wooden posts in the field of vegetables beyond the avenue of flowers, and you could find more than one withered hand next nailed to a post. What? In fact, there were white wooden posts in the field of vegetables beyond the avenue of flowers, and you can find more than one withered hand nailed to a post, or even showing the white of the bone next to the white of the post. They made an atrocious sight at the head of these fields of wheat and barley and lentils, these plots of onions and garlic, cucumber and watermelon, but the fields prospered. There was a gaiety, Gaiety. Let's look it up. I don't know what that means. Gaiety came up from the divine bellies, up through the north. Gaiety. Gaiety in the fields, like the prosperity of God. Okay. I think it was like pleasurable richness, atmospheric. I'm not going to look it up. Okay, I will. Fine. Nobody gives a shit. Gaiety. Garrote, gas chamber, garner, oops. Fuse, gad, gala, gaiety. The quality or state of being gay, cheerful, merriment, often gaieties, merrymaking or festivity. The gaieties of the New Year's season. Showiness, finery. Okay, we're pretty much right. Don't know where I was. There was a gaiety in the fields like the prosperity of gods, as if the marrow of merriment came up from divine bellies, up through the earth. That afternoon I wandered past the lanes and arbors of my great-grandfather, down to the ferns and eel-ridden marshes at the rear of his lands. His high ground was an island now in the flood, and the marshes looked like lakes with no trails through them. So I came by way of the vineyards, and picked the grapes and wandered through arbors of oranges and figs, past lemon trees and olive trees, acacia and sycamore, and ate a pomegranate, and spit out the seeds, still thinking of the dry, bloodied hand nailed to the post, and wanted to splash in the pool again, and piss my own water onto the gold and silver fish. Excitement came to me at the thought that they would drink my offering. Or did such excitement rise from the barnyard cries of sheep and goats, that came to me like the groaning of a stone hinge in a large door? It was a sound to match the heat of the day and the fermentation of food. Where'd you go, Lotus? Oh, hi. And it gave pleasure to my thighs. I live in moldering smells on a slow and heavy wind from livestock sheds, an unpleasant odor, and yet not all unpleasant. I felt drawn by the heat in this afternoon to a full taste of the feast below my feet, as if the gods, now merry, were at a banquet in the earth below. Even the braying of donkeys and the cries of the hens became part of this heavy marrow of the air. Later in the night, watching my mother and Menenhedet on the roof, there was less mystery. There was less mystery to me at the force between them. Indeed, those buddings I had felt in my heart and my thighs had all come together this afternoon, and I had felt my first transformation. That was like the gods. For in that hour, wandering the avenue of flowers, such was the magic in the grouping of geranium and violet, of dahlias, irises, and wondrous flowers, whose names I did not know, all burgeoning like a garden in me, that I was overpowered at last by the smell of flowers. As I breathed their perfume, so did other flowers open petals in my flesh, and a green stem rose from the center of my hips to my navel. I was inhaling musk into my heart, and the power of the earth rose up once in my belly, and fell back again like another body coming alive within my body, and rose once more. And I was wet all over, and in some river rich and white, like a cream in the heat. I did not know where the blooms of these flowers ended, and I began. Hi, girl. Now, as I looked over the gardens and saw the light of the moon on the pool, and the lanes that led to the servant and slave houses, saw the glow of fire to melt the pitch in the boat builder's shop, where workmen for some reason were still busy this night. As I looked on the very last of the guests sauntering down the lanes and disappearing in the turns of a clever maze, I also knew what was now passing between my mother and her grandfather, and I shivered at the mad cry of a monkey who called out from his cage, in a near-human, if sadly demented voice, how the moon was shining. In the heat it seemed as heavy as the earth beneath my toes this afternoon. A gazelle gave its small cry. Some fear was arising in Hathfertiti, some gathering of apprehension she could not locate. Even as the monkey gave his cry at the oncoming shift in the air, I felt a bolt of terror fly from my mother to me just before she screamed. Not aware that I was near, her horror was pure in its panic. I do not think I had ever heard my mother scream before. Then she began to weep like a child. Take it off. Take it off of me, she begged and grasped Menenhet's hand, pulling his fingers to her head, while whimpering with fury at the unmistakable knowledge that something was certainly crawling in the luxuriant bush of her coiffure. 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 And coiffures. A style of arranging or combing the hair. To arrange the hair in a coiffure. Coiffure. Fun. That something was certainly crawling in the luxuriant bush of her coiffure. Fucking Norman Mailer. This is disgusting. I think it's gross, right? I think something gross is happening. But just, I love it. It's fun. He found the louse in an instant, cracked it between his thumbnails and another, while Hathfertiti was racing her fingers through her hair, crying out with frantic petulance, "Are there more? Will you look?" He soothed her as if she were an animal in fright. Hold on. Animal in fright. Sorry, I keep getting up. He soothed her as if she were an animal in fright, stroking her hair like a mane, holding her chin, murmuring to her in a language of meaningless words, so soft they could have served for the intimate babble a man gives to his horse or his little bitty baby dog. And she calmed a little as he drew her to the light of a torch, ignoring the servants still there, one to each torch, standing unmoving through the night. No reason why Menenhet would have hesitated to do anything in front of them. But now, by the flare of the torch, he searched her scalp and assured Hathfertiti it was clean. At last she calmed, and he led her back to the couch. I'm trying to heat up. Just chill out. Crank the fucking heat. It's cold as shit, and I don't know if I can make it to work tomorrow. At last she calmed, and he led her back to their couch. "Are you sure there was only one?" she asked. He smiled. The wickedness of his smile was complete. Now Menenhet kissed her, but so adroitly. Okay, let's do it again. It's okay to not know what words are. Adroit. Adroitly. Hi, honey, you getting up? So adroit, an adjective. Expert in using the hands or body. Nimble. Adroit. Cleverly skilled, resourceful, or ingenious. Adroitly. Adroitness. Fun. Adroitly. Ah, I lost my page. Fucking shit. Fucking. Okay. Menenhet kissed her, but so adroitly, with such a lingering intimation that she leaned towards him for another. Not yet, he told her, and gave one more of his little smiles, so that I could not know if he referred to the insects or the kiss. I felt again a bolt of terror spring from her to me, but then I was already frightened. I did not wish to listen to what they might say next. I get it. I knew it would be close to what I could hear on so many a night in the voice of my nurse with either of her two friends. the Nubian slave who worked in the stables, and the Hebrew slave from the metal shops who sharpened the knives and swords. One or the other was always with her in the room next to mine at night. From there came the sounds of the barnyard and the birds' cries of the marsh and the swamp. So he doesn't hear the sounds of sexual pleasure. When it occurs, Mendenhead, it too seems to focus instead on the other sounds occurring nearby. Unless I'm misreading it. My nurse and her companions grunted each night like the pigs or roared like lions. Or he is seeing, viewing, witnessing these orgasmic audio clips as if, and his only relation to them are animals. I like that as well. Granted, grunted each night like pigs or roared like lions, and sometimes they came forth with high whinnying sounds of every muscle in their belly. Through all of my father's estate would such cries come up in the night. Yeah, everyone's just having fun in Egypt, huh? The long sighs of one couple seeming to start the growl of another, only to bring forth a third, roaring with pleasure, thereby encouraging the animals to join with their barks and screams and lowing sounds. Lowing. That's a good one. I didn't know lowing was a word. Let's look it up. Lowing. Fuck it, who cares? Somebody probably. I wonder. In this dictionary, someone underlined the word loud. That is the only mark I've ever seen in this dictionary. I've been carrying around for a while. Someone wrote loud. So let's read loud real quick. Well, just says no. We're going to do it anyways. Having exceptional volume or intensity. Loud talking, loud thunder. I'm acting like Gordon Cole right now. Making or uttering strongly audible sounds. A quartet of loud trombones. Clamorous, noisy, a loud party. Emphatic, insistent, loud in one's praises. Garish, ostentatious, a loud necktie. Obtrusively vulgar, coarse, strong or offensive in smell. In a loud manner, loudly, don't talk so loud. Cooper. I'm sorry for that. Listen, I know LOW. Okay. Ooh, okay, this is it. I found it. Low. So there's a humongous definition of low, which is going to be the obvious below something, above something, or, whatever. Low. To utter the deep sound characteristic of cattle. Moo. To utter as if by lowing. The act or the sound of lowing. I love you, David Lynch. I know you watch my show. I watch yours too. You're my favorite. You want to go out to dinner? Okay. And lowing sounds. Now my mother stood up and would have left Mendenhead, but she looked instead into his eyes, and their expressions were locked again. They did not speak, but the power of the attraction which had kept them looking into each other's eyes for all of an evening was here again, as if each pressed with the power of his will against the other. And I felt ill. Yeah. Except I was not sick so much as thrown about by the two winds that came howling at that instant all over all my childhood. And I heard him say to her, although indeed I do not know if it was his voice that entered my ear or his thought. For just as some are deaf, so had they begun to say of me that I was the opposite of those who cannot hear. Even what was unsaid could come into my mind. Oh, I love this. Parts of it. It's just fun. Whether he spoke it, therefore, or thought it only to himself, I certainly heard my great-grandfather say, your best opportunity with the Pharaoh is tomorrow. My mother replied, what if I find out I want, and what if I find what I want and you do not? Then you must remain loyal to Then you must remain loyal to me. That's my Mr. C voice from Twin Peaks. Then you must remain loyal to me, said my great-grandfather. I did not dare to look, and it was just as well, since even as my eyes were closing, so did Mendenhedit push my mother to her knees before his short white skirt. I felt the force of their thoughts like one chariot running full amuck into each other, and I saw into his mind. She must have seen it too. For all strength broke in her, and she cried out. My great-grandfather said, Set's cock is in your mouth. God, you're really fucking killing me here, buddy. Don't suck your grandpa's dick. I don't give a shit who you are. Don't do it. If your grandpa says do it, don't do it. Oh my God. How can this be such a fucking beautiful book? Well, dude, this is probably how things were in ancient Egypt. Based on what? I don't know, man. People are fucked up. Look at Egyptians, man. Look at not Egyptians in general, but look at photographs of pharaohs. Photographs, you fucking turd knuckle. Okay, calm down. Don't tell me what to fucking, oh God. Don't turn this into like your other channel, okay? This is different. Explain, stay on topic. Hey, honey. Okay. Drawings, pictographs, hieroglyphics of ancient Egyptian pharaohs slowly melt into this incestuous void of melty, lopsided faces where, if memory serves correct, these pharaohs towards the end of the reign of ancient Egypt, whatever that fucking means, honestly, I don't know. I don't understand what happened in Egypt. They were so dilapidated, so deformed from inbreeding that they were unable to do basic things like walk around or shit correctly, or suck their grandfather's wiener. Let's continue. I had a true sense of poison then, like a vindictiveness brooding in the intestines of the wind, and do not know if I swooned, but I was living in darkness. Not 6, nor 12, not 21, nor even dead. Was I dead? Okay, wait. And I do not know if I swooned, but I was living in darkness. Not 6, he means age. Not 12, not 21, nor even dead. Was I dead? But in the alcove of the grand gallery of the pyramid, Mendenhedit's cock was certainly in my mouth. This isn't the first weird thing in the book, man. This is like not remotely. What are you surprised by? This is fucking pretty wild. Yeah. Okay, you got this, buddy. My jaws froze. I felt helpless in every muscle and a rage at the core of my will. I had only to bite, and he too would scream. I knew at that instant I was equal to my mother, and I could not separate myself from her. He's witnessing his mother's moment in his mother's life that was disparaging, embarrassing, grotesque, and more than okay. Well, let's continue. What a fucking problem I'm dealing with everywhere. Okay, cock's in his mouth. I could say, okay, I knew in that instant I was equal to my mother. I don't remember where I was because I just spent 20 minutes figuring my car's stuck and I gotta do something, right? Can't do it. Fuck being on call, man. It's so stupid. It's fucking bullshit. I can't get called in every fucking night. My jaws froze. I felt helpless in every muscle, and a rage at the core of my will. I had only to bite, and he too would scream. I knew at that instant I was equal to my mother, and I could not separate myself from her. Hold on. God damn it. That's fine. Could not say I was Menenhedet too, the young and noble warrior, too soon dead, in feeling no fall from the heights of my own pride, for the mouth which sucked on him, who was not my own mouth, but my mother's, in all the windings of her thought and the currents of her senses. And I knew the cock of Set, as she knew it on the roof garden of my great-grandfather's house, above the banks of the Nile, and his flesh was hot, as the smelting pits of a sulphur mine, to scorch the flesh of her palate, my mind resting in hers. So was my mouth living in her mouth, and I tasted a curse deep as the virulence, fuck it, let's look it up, virul, virulence, a curse deep as the virulence in the seed of Set. Vitamin. Nope. Close. V-I-R-A? V-I-R-U. Virulence. The quality of being virulent. Actively poisonous, intensely noxious, highly infectious, malignant, or deadly, a virulent disease, violent or spitefully hostile, intensely bitter, spiteful, or malicious. As the virulence in the seed of Set, and I tasted a curse deep as the virulence in the seed of Set. And Menenhedet's hand was still holding mine, while the fingers of his other hand clasped the back of my head. Through my mother's ears, I could hear the unspoken voice of my great-grandfather, as he had spoken to her once while her mouth was engorged and with a throbbing upon her face. This is gross. My face, like the quivering of lightning in the heavy load of a murderous sky, so did something come up out of the bile of existence. Some noxious marrow of the corruptions of the dead, and Menenhedet came forth into her mouth, so into my mouth. Out of the loins of the dead Menenhedet, in the alcove of the pyramids, where I knelt, so did his discharge come like a bolt, and by the light of its flash, I knew how he held her head on the garden of that roof. The iron of his last shuddering pulse dripping its salt into the back of her tongue, and those thoughts passing from his head into hers. So was a cock withdrawn from my mouth in the dark, and I in the land of the dead began to feel a little happy expectation for what might be waiting next. Even as Hathfertiti, lips bruised and perfumes turned by the onslaught of his carnal aroma, had a happiness nonetheless in her limbs, and a scent of a rose in the finest folds of her meat, since she too had an expectation now for the morning. Expectation of what? On that thought, there still on my knees, I was transported with her, as by one breath of my mind, to the golden light of our trip downriver, in all the splendid anticipation of an audience with our Pharaoh, Ramses IX, while I dreamed of him in all the morning effulgence of the Nile. Well, we gotta look up effulgence. Jesus. Ugh. E-F-F-U-L. Effulgent. Shining forth brilliantly. Radiant. Effulgent. It's a good word. That was fucking wild. Jesus, shit in a fucking rock. Oh my lord. What the heck? Okay, let's try to put this all together. It was a long one. Book of the Child, he is... Oh my god. Mixing memories up with his own and his mom's, with his childhood, with maybe seeing himself at 21. And it all kind of... And he sees his grandfather on a boat on a memory, which there was no way his grandfather would have been there. There's a weird statement about how his grandfather never paid attention to him, which could kind of have something to do with the fact that they never met each other before death. And then he's transported into a memory. This is what I think, of his mother, where he exists in himself as a child, because that's all he would be able to... I mean, because I might be misreading this. This is all based on the fact, on my concept, that Menenhettet 1 and Menenhettet 2 have never met in life. So these memories, or wandering around the fucking subconscious ether that is the limbo or waiting room to the Egyptian afterlife, all these entwining memories, he finds himself watching his mother and his great-grandfather get a little funky. I have lots of cell phones. And then Menenhettet seemingly forces his granddaughter to fillet him. And in the throes of ecstasy, before that occurs, Menenhettet 2 is... and Nefertiti are synonymous beings. In this moment of great fear and weird delight, apparently, I don't understand how Nefertiti feels about this moment. She seems to be okay with it. A little disturbed, but fine nonetheless. And then after this moment where him and his mom are not only blowing their grandpa and great-grandfather, but also set. Sexuality in this book is... the concept of perversion is just non-existent here, seemingly. It's super sex positive, but incestuous. It's not good. Gross shit. Would you feel better about this if it wasn't? Abso-fucking-lutely. 100%. I would feel super differently about this if these people weren't related. I would feel good about it. Well, that's good. Good for you. But that's fucking disgusting. Well written, but goddamn gross as shit. And then he's transported back to that lovely, lovely morning he remembers with his mother and father. I really enjoy this intermingling of memories. I think it's done exquisitely well. And to focus on so like, sorry, let me backtrack too. So sexuality in itself is not a perversion, which is great, right? In ancient Egypt or in Norman Miller's The Back of His Mind. It is instead used as kind of a normal handshake, right and left, a wrestling move, you know? Frankly, anal rape is a fucking wrestling move. Homosexuality is not... It doesn't seem like when it comes to the love you would feel with another person, it's not that. Like, homosexuality in this book seems to be just something that occurs out of boredom. Not from some deep lust specific to gender, but of sexuality as like a communication form. As a form of speaking. I mean, these people aren't talking to each other very often. It doesn't seem like, besides Menenhettet 1 and 2. And also Menenhettet is probably just not even a real being, right? I am perplexed, confused why if they had met in real life. In actual, as far as this book's concerned, if they actually hung out. 15 pages, hour and a half. Holy fucking fart knuckle. Just. Hi, honey. Wow. Man, I got fucking screwed over at work. Well, no, I didn't. I can't go to work. Fucking car's broke. Try to call me in as much as you fucking want, guys. It's not occurring. Okay, let's leave on a high note. I don't know. Very well written. I'm engaged. I'm thinking about it. And like in the same way that I become a bit obsessed with things like Twin Peaks, mostly that. My focus is so far away from the grotesqueness. That's another fucking incest thing. Like, I don't even remember that shit. I'm thinking about the Black Lodge and about all sorts of shit. Like, maybe for me, it's like blacking out these things that I find to be grotesque. Because when I picked up this book just now, that's not where my fucking mind was. I forgot all about it. Every time it's set like banged his fucking brother. No. Nephew? In the heat of battle. Is that what happened? Did he? He tried to. I think he just kind of popped the head in. I mean, it's rape. That's what's going on here. Incestuous rape. So that's literally the only way to look at it. From this day and age, right? No matter how normal this was, no matter how normal slavery was, no matter how normal racism was, no matter how normal all sorts of fucked up shit used to be, it needs to be called out for what it is, I think. Pretty gross.